Welcome to another episode of the Back in Time podcast with Kyle and JD, where every week we jump into our DeLorean, cruise to 88 miles per hour, and travel back in time to review our favorite films. This week, in episode 11, we travel all the way back to October 27th of 1978 to review the horror slasher film Halloween, starring Donald Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis. First off, I want to thank you for clicking the download button on the podcast today. I want to encourage you to find us on Apple Podcast or the podcast app on your phone and subscribe to our page. It's super easy, and every time we post a new episode, it will automatically download to your device. Also, leave us a 5-star review while you're there. That helps us grow the podcast and eventually pick up sponsors to help keep this podcast growing. You can also find us on social media at Back in Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or you can visit us online at backintimepod.wordpress.com. Now, on to the show. Let's talk some Halloween and Michael Myers.
I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Welcome to the Back in Time podcast. It is Friday. I am excited to talk with you guys. I've got my co-host here, Justin, DeSandro, JD. What's happening?
Not much. Just soaking up the sun in sunny Haddonfield right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So looking forward to diving into some Halloween here. Let's start as we usually do by talking about last week's episode. What was the feedback on Friday the 13th? What'd you hear?
Well, definitely, I'm happy to see the amount of people that have been following us, that have been jumping into the episode. I think that it was a very timely episode coming out on Friday the 13th. Our number one fan, Jesse, had some viewer feedback and some information, especially about the snake scene. He was telling me, because the snake is actually killed in that scene, but he was saying that was entirely improvised.
Okay. Yeah, that may have been. I did listen to an interview with Tom Savini, who was in charge of all that, and I might have missed that part. So that's interesting to know.
Yeah, so apparently it was improvised, and the snake handler cried afterward.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, I bet he did.
Yeah, obviously.
It'd be like if you were on the set of Homeward Bound and they were like, well, we killed the dog. Well, okay. Well, that's like my best friend, so obviously I'm going to go cry and sue you guys.
Can you imagine if John Wick was the dog handler?
No kidding. I think the feedback online's been really good. We've been getting a lot of likes on our photos. We've been getting comments. There is a topic up on Twitter right now, so we're at Back in Time Pod on Twitter. Help us decide what we're going to review in November. We're trying to pick a comedy movie. We've got Ace Ventura, Wayne's World, Happy Gilmore, and American Pie. So if you're listening to this on Friday, that means you have 3 days left to vote. So try and get your vote in before Sunday. Right now, Wayne's World is in the lead. So if you're wanting one of the other 3 movies, share, retweet, comment, do whatever you can to help make sure we review the one that you want to hear.
Including make sure you vote for Ace Ventura.
Yeah, Justin's very heavy on the Ace Ventura. And I am ixnay on the Wayne's World nay, as they would say.
Swing.
So that's up on the Twitter, as they say. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, and we've got a website as well, backintimepod.wordpress.com. The best way for you guys to help support the podcast is to go on the iTunes, leave us a 5-star review, write a review about the show, what you love, and that helps us move up the rankings and continue to grow and bring on new listeners, which eventually may mean we might actually make a penny off of this thing and be able to keep doing it for a long time. So,
I think definitely our goal should be make more money on this than we did from the Pizza Parlor Massacre.
So what did we clear on that? About $1.97?
No, I think at least like $5.
$5?
I think over the years it's been about $5. I mean, we almost paid for that pizza that we stole.
Yeah, so to put that into perspective, we still would be a little short on a $5 Little Caesar pizza because we wouldn't have money for tax. So that's a bit depressing. But yeah, help us out, review, and we'll keep doing them because we're loving it. We'll do some intro into Halloween in just a minute, but let's talk about the week. I know you went and saw a movie at the theater. Tell the listeners what you saw.
So I definitely went and saw the sequel to Groundhog Day. I mean, Happy Death Day.
I almost spit my water out.
I know you haven't gotten a chance to check it out yet, and I know that I gave you a kind of scathing minute review, but for those of you that have seen it, reach out to us and let us know what you think. If you're going to disagree with my opinion, then please send me all your hate mail. If you haven't seen it, I don't hope to sway you or, persuade you, but I was not a fan of the movie. I loved The Masked Killer. They did a good job of bringing that back. Enjoyed the concept of waking up and starting and redoing your day, especially when you died the night before. It was kind of like a really grim, very novel approach at the horror genre, especially at the slasher genre.
Yeah.
But to me, the movie, it falls a little short. You can tell it's a Blumhouse movie, so you can get a feeling for parts where I would assume Jason Blum and company sort of tinkered to make it more of a commercial piece.
Okay.
And really diluted down the story and really watered down the potential of what could have been a killer concept. And they do make it, you're waiting the whole time. You're sitting there going, this is just the sequel to Groundhog Day, and they do make a Groundhog Day joke.
One thing that's funny that they have that in there. I like that little tip of the cap. But that movie was a $4.2 million budget. They debuted first weekend $26.5 million, which
That's
goes to show you,
model.
You can spend as much money as you want. They spent $150 million on Blade Runner, and Happy Death Day had almost as good of an opening weekend. So they've already made back their budget times about 8. So
I definitely failed college mathematics. So don't you bring that shit to this court.
Yeah, I just realized that's way more than 26. So it would have definitely been more like times 7. But yeah, obviously Blade Runner will be damn lucky if they recoup their money. And meanwhile, they're probably already planning Happy Next Day Death Day.
Happy Next Day Death Day. But no, that's, we've obviously dedicated the month of October to horror movies.
Yes.
And, Hollywood knows that horror movies are shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, people come out to see it. They want to get spooked. They want to get scared. You release something in October, the return on investment is usually pretty huge. And over, we get movies like Don't Breathe and Get Out. Happy Death Day, where it's like a lower budget. Where you said 4.2?
4.2, yeah.
Jeez, that's like what Tom Cruise clears in a movie alone.
4.2? Oh man, I'm sure studios wish they got him for 4.2. I think it's more like 42 for a lot of movies. But to go on that point, we've got some more horror movies coming into theaters here pretty quickly. So this weekend you've got The Snowman. Have you seen the trailer for The Snowman?
I've been avoiding watching the trailer for that.
I think it looks pretty cool.
I want to go in dry.
Yeah, I think that's a movie I'm going to check out this week, barring that you see it first and then deter me from going.
But I always poo-poo movies.
The week after, we've got Jigsaw coming out, and we're going to be reviewing the original Saw to go along with it, so that'll be fun.
Do we get to? Can we announce that we might have a special guest next week?
We can.
We might have a special guest next week. I don't want to name names. What if it doesn't work out?
Well, I mean, as long as it doesn't rhyme with messy, we should be fine.
Okay, gotcha.
Last name Pinkman. Let's go ahead and just talk a little bit about some of the trailers. So, did you see the new Star Wars trailer that dropped this last week on Monday Night Football?
So this is something that you're going to give me a little shit for, and maybe some of our listeners will too.
Uh-oh.
I purposely try to avoid trailers. I don't like watching them because, as we talked about in the Halloween trailer, and then even the Friday the 13th trailer the week before, the way that trailers are presented now are different.
Yes.
So now, I'm afraid to watch trailers. I'm afraid to watch the new Star Wars trailer in fear of it's going to ruin the movie. I'm going to be sitting there and I've seen this. They chalk so much stuff into these quick cuts.
Yeah.
That, I'm always really unsatisfied when I sit through a movie. So I try to take big movies like that and not watch the trailers.
I think that's a really good point. I think, one of the best trailers I think I ever watched was the original teaser for The Dark Knight, where you see very little and you hear the Joker at the very end for the first time. And I think everybody was just like, I'm in. That's all I need to hear. Because you don't even see him. So, go back and watch that one on YouTube. It's a really good teaser. So, but yeah, I agree. I think they do give away too much. So we've got that. It's going to be coming around Christmas. And the other thing I'm excited about, we are about 9 or 10 days away from the release of Season 2 of Stranger Things. And they dropped the second trailer for that. I'm really excited, one, because they put the kids with dressing up as Ghostbusters for Halloween. And they all walk around in proton packs, which is really cool. But just some of the stuff that you see in the trailer just looks crazy. And they're going to open up that universe, the Upside Down, and I think Season 2 is going to be even better than the first one.
Let me ask you a question. Did you ever watch the TV show Fringe?
I watched bits and pieces of Fringe. It's been a while, and I don't really remember it.
So for those of you who don't know, Fringe was a J.J. Abrams TV show from, I don't know, maybe 2009?
2008 to 2013.
There you go, starring your boy, Mighty Ducks alum Joshua Jackson.
Yes.
But it was a really cool X-Files type show that hits on a lot of the same topics that Stranger Things hits on, to the point where if you watch one after the other, you kind of have to wonder, did the Duffer brothers watch a lot of Fringe? So I'm excited to see what they do with Season 2 of the show, because I thought that Season 1 of Stranger Things was pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And it obviously, the cultural influence from that show was felt all the way up to the new movie It.
Yeah.
Which was essentially, it had the kid.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good comparison. And we will definitely be talking about that show, I'm sure, throughout November as we're kind of watching it. So maybe we'll even have a little segment of each episode. 10 minutes on the, what do you think about that?
Oh, it's I like that, a little special dissection.
Yeah. There we go. We could do that throughout, for how many episodes they have, we'll do that for how many weeks. And just do a quick recap.
They usually do 13?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around there. So, cool. So I think that's it as far as, there's not a lot coming into cinema this week. I know there's that, movie that kind of deals with, kind of Mother Nature and storms. I think it's called Geostorm. That's the biggest release as far as the amount of theaters. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Snowman come out and take it away and be the number one. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult to topple horror movies in October. That's, I think Happy Death Day will have another good weekend. I think The Snowman will do good. I think It will continue to do well. And then leading up until Jigsaw, which I think is just going to...
Yeah.
I've got a feeling that's going to be pretty big.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to take that back right now. For sure, Tyler Perry's Boo 2, A Medea Halloween will be number one.
That's a good...
I don't know if that's a good thing, but it's going to be number one. I can almost guarantee that. And then there's also a movie called Only the Brave that looks really good. It's about like a firestorm type deal, like kind of like what they're dealing with in California right now.
Well, so it's funny that you say that because I know for a fact that Jesse is gung ho about watching that movie.
Yeah, it looks really good. I think I kind of want to see that too. So
I'm going to take the over under. I'm going to let you have Medea, and I'm going to take the Firestorm movie, and loser buys a drink.
Okay, you're giving me Medea. Thank the Lord for that. Cool. So let's transition into the topic for the week, which is the 1978 film Halloween. So before I get into some intros, first memory of Halloween for you, the movie, not the trick or treating.
Heyo. I want to say this was another one in high school. I want to say that I probably saw a lot of the later one.
Yeah.
Oh, I know exactly what it was. What was the one? So there was H2O.
Yes. Halloween Resurrection after that.
What year was... I think it was H2O I saw in theaters.
Yeah, H2O was probably more than likely the first one you saw.
So that was it. Yeah, I saw it in theaters. I had been probably caught some of the other films on USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried.
Nice.
But yeah, no, and after seeing that movie, it definitely kicked off. I mean, that was right in the wheelhouse of those 90s slasher movies, going from Scream to I Know What You Did Last Summer to Urban Legend.
Yeah, I think I saw Halloween before I got into Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and all those movies that came out very similar to that following. So I was already a fan of the genre. And this is a movie that, man, I think the first time I saw this, I feel like I didn't sleep for a week. And anytime I went down into the basement and would go down there to drop off laundry, on the way up after I shut the light off, I sprinted up the steps because I was afraid Michael Myers was going to be right behind me, dun dun dun, just chasing me. So I mean, it scared the crap out of me.
So that's a really good question. Was that your first? It scared the crap out of me movie.
Chuck, actually, that would go to Child's Play, which I remember seeing when I was 5 at one of my friend's house. And I don't think we were supposed to be watching it, but we were watching it in the background. And I went home that night and could not sleep. And every stuffed animal or toy that I had in my room, I threw into the closet. Yeah, and I just recently rewatched Child's Play this week actually because I wanted to go see that, or I wanted to watch the new one that just came out on Netflix. And so I rewatched 1, 2, and I'm halfway through 3. They're still really good movies. We definitely need to break down Child's Play
at some point. With Annie Camden.
What's that?
The mom from Seventh Heaven.
That's a nice reference. Is that who that is?
Yeah.
Wow, I did not realize that. So that's pretty good intro.
Aren't you going to ask me what my scary movie was?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fuck you.
Come on, let's hear it. You're dying to tell me anyway.
I'll give you double or nothing, and I'll let you erase your Medea bet if you can guess what the movie is. And I'll call it a wash if you at least are in the wheelhouse.
Okay. I am going to go Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, but I'm going to give you in the wheelhouse, and I'll tell you why. So it was Pet Sematary.
Okay.
And Stephen King and Wes Craven were both pretty big in that time period, so they're kind of similar-ish movies. So I'll give you credit and let you erase your Medea bet.
Okay. So next Halloween, we need to get into Pet Sematary. I didn't know that was a favorite of yours.
Nightmares, man. I was 6 years old.
That's I don't know if I ever watched that thing all the way through, that movie. So that might be a really fun one to go through for me.
That's what she said.
Yeah, there you go. So let's do some intro to Halloween though. So Halloween is a 1978 American slasher film directed and scored by John Carpenter, co-written with producer Deborah Hill, starring Donald Pleasance and Jamie Lee Curtis in her film debut. It is the first installment of the Halloween franchise, which would go on to span 9 different films, with number 10 on the way next year. In the film, on Halloween night in 1963, Michael Myers murders his sister in the fictional Midwestern town of Haddonfield, Illinois. He escapes on October 30th, 1978. He escapes on October 30th of 1978 from Smith's Grove Sanitarium and returns home to kill again. The next day, Halloween, Michael stalks teenager Laurie Strode and her friends, while Michael's psychiatrist, Dr. Sam Loomis, pursues his patient. Halloween was released to cinema on October 27th, 1978. So 3 days before it actually takes place. Good timing.
Very smart.
Halloween was produced on a budget of $300,000. We'll talk more about the box office in a minute. It would go on to sell nearly 30 million tickets in 1978, becoming one of the most profitable independent films of all time. Many critics credit the film as the first in a long line of slasher films inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960. After viewing Carpenter's film Assault on Precinct 13, which was in 1976, independent film producer Irwin Yablans and financier Mustafa Akkad sought out Carpenter to direct a film for them about a psychotic killer who stalked babysitters. In the interview with Fangoria magazine, Yablans stated, "I was thinking that it would make sense in the horror genre, and what I wanted to do is make a picture that had the same impact as The Exorcist." Carpenter and his then girlfriend Deborah Hill began drafting a story originally titled The Babysitter Murders, but as Carpenter told Entertainment Weekly, Yablans suggested setting the movie on Halloween night and naming it Halloween instead. How good of a call was that by John Carpenter?
Yeah, I mean, you can't ever redo it. Halloween, they took a major holiday and they turned it into a franchise.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about this movie today if it was called The Babysitter Murders. So
no,
I'd be very surprised.
We don't talk about the movie Cheerleader Autopsy, do we?
Nope, definitely not. So just a little bit about the music of the movie. So this is not only directed and co-written by John Carpenter, but it's scored by John Carpenter, who, not only is he a very talented director, but he's a very good musician. Played in a band as well for a while, and admittedly cannot actually read music. So he does all this by ear, which is super impressive for somebody like me that can barely play guitar, but I can read music. So the fact that he came up with all of this just by ear is insane. So, I mean, this might be the strongest asset of the entire movie. What do you think of the music and the sound of the movie?
We talked about music production and, the audio of Friday the 13th last week, and how that element, raised the tension. And in Halloween, it's haunting. Did the soundtrack and audio production win awards? Do you know?
That's a great question. I can look that up if you want to add something.
I was just curious. I mean, it is so good, and it's so simple, and it's so everlasting. To this day, you can listen to the soundtrack of the movie without necessarily watching the movie, and you just get this anxiety inside, which is builds.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on here for the awards, so I don't think it won anything for sound, but man, I feel like it should have. That's a really good point. So the only thing they really received was Best Feature from Chicago International Film Festival in '78. Los Angeles Film Critics Association, they were the winner for New Generation Award. And they won a Saturn Award for Best Horror Film. So yeah, not much on the award side, but yeah, they should have for the music. I've got a couple did you know type of facts here. So in 1980, the television rights to Halloween were sold to NBC for $4 million. Keep in mind they made the movie for $300,000. So that's a pretty good deal. After debate among Carpenter, Hill, and NBC standards and practices over censoring of certain scenes, Halloween appeared on television for the first time in October of 1981. To fill the 2-hour time slot, Carpenter had to film an additional 12 minutes of material, which they did during the production of Halloween 2. Which I have never seen that extra footage. Have you?
It's got to be somewhere. Unless I've seen it by accident, I can't say that I've been.
Yeah.
It's exposed itself to me in that manner.
Yeah, and it's not in like the DVD. So if that's what you watch to prepare for this, it's not part of that. So, and I have like 3 different special editions, and I still haven't seen it. So, if it's there, it's hidden. The script, and I think you'll love this from a script writing standpoint, they wrote the entire script for this in 10 days. How impressive is that?
That is extraordinarily impressive. I would love to know what level of alcohol and drug intake was participated in.
Yeah, obviously I've only helped you write like one script, and I feel like we took a year on that, and it turned into nothing. So, like, how hard is that to do in 10 days?
If you have a good enough outline, if you have good enough notes, as a writer, you're only impaired by how fast you can type.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can type 100 words a minute, you can fit a few hundred words per page, and you're only looking to make, 96 pages.
Yeah.
You can swing through a script pretty quickly, but you have to do the pre-planning. You have to have, your storyboards. You have to have your notes and your outline, your character development. And you have to have everything sort of in your mind. It's not just sitting down at a typewriter and just furiously Mozarting away. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But with that said, still to do what they did in 10 days to create essentially a genre is, to launch a genre. I'm not saying that they necessarily created it, but they defined it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then also remembering that that was probably 77 when they wrote it then, or early 78. So there's no computer. They're probably not, the type of, 78, you weren't learning typing classes like we did. So, that's them like one finger at a time, like turning out an entire script. So that's super impressive. Due to the shoestring budget, the prop department had to use the cheapest $2 mask they could find in the costume store. And they settled on a Star Trek 1966 William Shatner mask. They later spray painted the face white, teased out the hair, and reshaped the eye holes. Shatner admitted for years he had no idea his likeness was used for the film, and it was only during an interview recently that someone mentioned the mask was being used, and he has since stated that he is honored by the gesture. The mask was purchased for $1.98.
So, did you see the movie Baby Driver?
Yes.
How great was that robbery scene when they go to put on the Michael Myers mask and the guy gets the wrong one?
Yes. Yeah, they wanted the Michael Myers mask, and they came out with the Michael Myers from Wayne's World.
Gosh.
Oh, such a good mask.
So awesome.
Obviously, what is the name of that movie? The Spy Who Shagged Me. Austin Powers. There we go. So, yeah, that's it. That was incredible. I laughed so hard. PJ Souls said that the word totally was written in the script, but she decided to try and ad-lib the word as much as possible until John Carpenter told her to stop. He never did.
Totally.
So that's why totally is totally part of the script all over the place. Of the female leads, all the girls are supposed to be in high school, but only Jamie Lee Curtis was actually a teenager at the time of shooting. The other 2 ladies were about 10 years older than she was. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but I'm not really surprised. I'm surprised that Jamie Lee Curtis was as young as she is, because she does kind of look like a 30-year-old mom. Yeah,
they did a good job of making her look. I shouldn't say they did a good job, because with their budget, she actually did pretty much everything. In fact, she said in a interview at a convention that she bought the entire wardrobe for the entire movie. She bought it herself for $100 at JCPenney. Everything she wears.
That's a great JCPenney commercial right there.
Yeah, they should be using that more.
You know what? I think they still have those same clothes on their racks, too.
John Carpenter's intent with the character of Michael Myers was that the audience should never be able to relate to him. That's an interesting take. What do you, any thoughts on that?
Well, I definitely like the way that you can take a character and you try to position him against the audience. And the comparison that I'll make is when Stan Lee created Iron Man.
Yeah.
For the comic books, he went on record saying that he wanted to create a character that was so loathsome, so hateful, that was such a bad person, that he wanted to take that person and turn him into a lovable character. Mm-hmm. Which I think Robert Downey Jr. did remarkably on the screen. But when you really think about the character, you're just like, man, why would I want to relate to this alcoholic, abusive person? So to say that Michael Myers was created in a similar vein, where you have him in a way that he's not relatable in any way, shape, or form, it's true. Like, I really hope that you can't relate to him.
So Halloween was shot in 20 days in the spring of 1978, made on a budget for $300,000. And again, it was the highest grossing independent movie ever made at that time. Half of the $300,000 budget was spent on Panavision cameras. So the film would have a 2.35-1 scope. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. If you're a camera guy out there, tweet at me, hate me. Donald Pleasance was paid $20,000 and was only on set for 5 days' work. So they spent a lot of money on cameras and Donald Pleasance. Everything else was shoestring. So a couple other things as far as the finances go. Jamie Lee Curtis, this again was her first feature film. She had done a little bit of TV, not much before that. She made a reported $8,000 for her efforts. I'd love to feel a little bit bad for her, but she's definitely made that on all the sequels. She made, I think, $3 million for her role in Halloween Resurrection, and she's in the movie for like 3 minutes. So she's gotten her money back. So don't feel too bad for her. Let's see here. John Carpenter approached Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee to play the Sam Loomis role, which eventually placed... let me start that again. John Carpenter approached Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee to play the Sam Loomis role that eventually was played by Donald Pleasance. They both turned down the role due to the low pay. Lee later said it was the biggest mistake he ever made in his career. Donald Pleasance's daughter, Jean, which I have something about her next as well, is actually an occupational therapist at a psychiatric hospital. How ironic is that?
I think Alanis Morissette would sing about it. That's how ironic it is.
Donald Pleasance confessed to John Carpenter that the main reason why he took the part of Loomis was because his daughter, Angela, who was a musician, had loved Carpenter's musical score for his previous movie, Assault on Precinct 13, and that is why he did the movie. The duration of his scenes is just over 18 minutes out of 90. So he's top billing, he's the highest paid, and he's only in the movie for about 1/5 of the actual time. Not a bad job for him. Let's hop into some box office and do some critic response, and then we'll get to the review here. So the film was shot on an estimated budget of $300,000 to $325,000 and grossed domestically $47 million. There is no week-to-week breakdown for this film, as it was released regionally and not nationally like most of today's films. In addition, Halloween also made $23 million internationally, making the worldwide gross $70 million, which if you adjust this to inflation, if this was released in 2017, the movie would have cost $1.1 million, grossed $176 million domestically, $86 million internationally, and the worldwide gross would be $262 million, meaning they would have recouped their budget by $262. times their budget. So with inflation, just so you know, Jamie Lee Curtis still would only have been paid $30,000. So, any thoughts on the box office numbers here? Because that's pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, I love to think about the time frame and when the movie came out, and to hear that budget, and even what that budget is on inflation, is just staggering, you know?
Yeah. Yep. The only thing you can really compare that to, obviously, you could go back to Paranormal Activity from about 8-9 years ago. So they made that movie on a $15,000 budget, but then they put almost $500,000 into the marketing, and then they went on to make about $107,000 and 193 worldwide. But yeah, I would venture to say there would be no Paranormal Activity if there wasn't a Halloween to set the standard. The film has also made close to $19 million in home video rentals. That was the other number. So back in the old box office blockbuster days. Last thing, we'll jump into Critic Response. I just have one thing because we've mentioned them on every single show. Let's do guess the response first. So why don't you try and guess the Critic Response for Halloween?
I don't... Do you remember what Friday the 13th Critics was?
I want to say 70 or 60, somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay, so I'm going to say 78%.
Okay. And what about audience?
See, I keep doing the audience bad, so I'm going to go with my gut, and I'm going to say 8. No, I'm not going to go with my gut. I'm going to say 73.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say 87 initially, and I realized that's way too fucking high.
Should have went with your gut. Halloween carries a 93% fresh score from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes and carries a 89% audience score.
Oh, so I was almost... fuck. Let the record say thank you for letting me give out what I was going to say, so there's the proof is in the pudding.
Yes. So these numbers are very similar to the current smash hit in theaters, It, on Rotten Tomatoes. And then our old buddy Roger Ebert said Halloween is an absolutely merciless thriller. A movie so violent and scary, yes, I would compare it to Psycho. So he gave it an overwhelmingly positive review. And then they were interviewed, Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, by Terry Gross live in front of an audience for a fundraiser in Chicago in 1996. Terry asked them about the scariest movie they'd seen. Roger mentioned how the first Halloween was extremely scary, and then recounted how when Gene saw it in a local movie theater, he was so scared he took a cab home, even though he only lived 2 blocks from the theater. Gene then recounted how when he got home, he went to the shower and pulled back the curtain to see if anyone was there. That's a pretty cool story. I did talk with my dad, who would have been 25 at the time this movie was released, and he said he saw it in theaters like one of the opening weekends, and just said it was terrifying. It was, it was unlike anything that anybody had ever seen, and people were screaming in the theaters during the chase scenes, and that when they walked out of the theater that night, he just like I don't think you're ever going to go see a movie the same way again. And then, they obviously followed up with Friday the 13th and all those movies that followed. So that was cool just to hear that he actually saw it like the day that it came out or that first weekend. So,
yeah, I like that story because you don't really think about, a lot of times, at least I don't, the cinematic experience of seeing a movie opening weekend and what that means and what that contributes to the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's an impactful day for certain movies.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick bathroom break, and we'll be back on the other side with the review for Halloween.
But what are you doing, Doc? I need fuel.
And JD, I have to say, there's nothing worse than trying to find a movie at the store that they just don't carry anymore. I mean, I went through Walmart, I went through Target, I went on the Best Buy, I went online to their websites. I was trying everything possible. I went into an FYE trying to find Child's Play 2, Child's Play 3, because I've been on this little kick. I want to see those movies. And I decided, guys, I'm going to make it super easy for you. All you need to do is go to backintimepod.wordpress.com, and I'm going to put links in there to all the movies that we review and even some of the movies that we haven't done yet, like Child's Play. And that's an easy way for you to help support the podcast. You click on the link, you buy the DVD or Blu-ray that you want. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and Amazon kicks back a few pennies our way to help keep the podcast going. So take a look at that, backintimepod.wordpress.com. I also want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Ghostbusters web series Station 6. They released the first episode of their web series on Sunday. I sat down and watched it about a week before it was released, and I watched it completely finished this weekend. I have to say they did a great job. Shout out to those guys over there. Give them a follow on Instagram. Just type in Ghostbusters Station 6. You'll be able to find them. They're on Twitter, same thing. Ghostbusters Station 6. And then get on the YouTube, check out the web series, watch the first episode, and fall in love with Ghostbusters all over again. Who are you going to call? Awesome. So why don't we jump into the review here, and we'll just kind of get going here. So the credits begin. One thing I found interesting here, it says Donald Pleasance in John Carpenter's Halloween. I guess I never realized that Donald Pleasance was above the title. And, the credits also introduced Jamie Lee Curtis, as this is her first movie. But what were your thoughts on that?
It's always been a key takeaway is how big of a role Donald Pleasance plays in this movie. And it stuck out to me like a sore thumb just the same. Like when I saw his name pop up right there, it's well above top billing. Like he is the man in this movie. And It shows. I've got a lot to say about him.
Good. So we start with a point of view camera angle outside of a white home. The camera goes around to the side of the house, and we see a couple of teenagers on the couch making out. The guy says, "We are alone, aren't we?" In which she replies, "Michael's around here somewhere." The guy suggests they go upstairs. Do you think he's looking to get his beak wet here?
Yeah, I definitely think he's looking to beak. There's going to be some pretty solid beak action, and I think that's that's pretty on par for horror movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So the camera goes all the way around the back of the house and enters. Michael grabs a butcher knife out of the drawer. I assume it's Michael. In the years following this film, this knife has kind of become synonymous with Michael Myers and the Halloween franchise. I found it interesting to see it here for kind of the first time. Did you have any takeaways on that?
The knife is iconic. You're absolutely right. It is sort of like, I love how every serial killer sort of has their own weapon of destruction. And this one is such a simple one, yet it's so complex. And it fits. It's like the fucking thing's about half the size of young Michael Myers.
Yeah. So the guy that was going upstairs to get busy leaves the home, and Michael makes his way up the stairs. Again, everything is from point of view at this point. We're not actually seeing what he looks like. He reaches down and grabs a mask and puts it on, and now the camera shot has two eye holes. And that's such a great little add in there by the director Carpenter. Next, we see Michael's sister. She's completely nude. Holy shnikes. Not to go back to episode 5 with Chris Farley and Tommy Boy, but if I showed a picture of her to my buddies at school, she'd definitely be voted boner of the month, if you know what I mean. Anyway, she yells, "Michael!" and he stabs her several times and kills her, and then walks out the front door, and he's met by, I'm assuming, his parents, and the father says, "Michael?" and removes his mask, and we get our first glimpse of young Michael And as you mentioned a minute ago, he's holding a massive butcher knife that looks to be about half the size of him. And thoughts on this opening sequence?
Well, I know that this movie, it definitely takes place before last week's episode
Yes.
when Friday the 13th came out. But again, we're talking about a movie that falls into the cycle of the pre-existing evil that occurs. And we get to see it defined with just the same way that Friday the 13th did. And we know that Friday the 13th took many cues from Halloween. But it's cool to have watched these episodes back to back and to see how both movies sort of open with this flashback of a horrible atrocity.
Yeah. Yeah, in the next scene we're going to see, it says October 30th, 1978. Later in the movie, you'll hear, actually coming up soon, you'll hear Dr. Loomis say he hasn't spoken in 15 years. So I guess it's fair to assume that opening sequence is 1963, Halloween night. So I don't know if that's ever mentioned, but that's just what I'm kind of adding in there. So anyway, so we do pick up, it says October 30th, 1978. For those of you counting at home, that's exactly 38 years, 11 months, and 20 days from the time that you're listening to this episode. This is also the second movie we've done that's actually older than we are, back-to-back weeks. So we have a heavy rainfall, a car passes by the road, and we get our first look inside. It's Dr. Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance. I know you said you had something to say about him. What's your first impression here of Dr. Loomis?
My first impression of him, it's always, and this used to always confuse me when I was younger, is I always remembered him being a detective.
Yeah.
And for some reason, he just has this detective vibe to him. He's almost like Dennis Franz. You know, he's got this sort of muffled up suit, and he's got this balding head, and he's just this cranky, cantankerous, just... Brrr.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot more of that detectiveness as we go along here and get a little bit later into the film. So he's driving. There's a nurse. We don't ever catch her name, but he explains to her that she shouldn't worry about him. He hasn't spoken in 15 years, but he also warns her to understand what we're dealing with here and to not underestimate him. So they pull up to the hospital. The nurse says, "So when do they allow them to roam around?" And you look over on the right, and there's just a bunch of people in white outfits in a field. What do you think they're thinking on this shot from the filming aspect? They're just having people in almost like a little, I don't know, like a pasture.
Yeah, I don't know the full history behind the scene, but I'm going to say that I laugh.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing that if it happened to you in real life, if you were pulling up to a loony bin and you just kind of saw the patients like meandering around, like that would be utterly frightening.
Outside in a thunderstorm. Yeah. Very, very odd. We see someone jump on top of the car. Dr. Loomis has gone up to the front gate to try and get it open, and the nurse is alone. She sticks her head out the window to see who it is, and a hand reaches down and grabs her face, causing her to swerve and go and crash the car. Eventually, she flees after a few more attempts from the man on top of the car, and the guy jumps down and drives off. Loomis comes running up and says, "He's gone. The evil is gone." Did you think this was Michael? I guess my initial thought is, knowing I've seen every single film in this franchise, I don't take him as somebody that's super flexible and athletic. But I mean, he jumped on top of the car and then leaped down like he was, a track star here. I don't know why this bothered me so much.
As someone else who I've probably seen over 263 movies in my life, so I'm very astute when it comes to picking up on the intricacies of characters. And,
right.
I think... So I think that there's really no preface to the fact that it is Michael Myers here. All you see is this arm. It's almost like it's zombie-like, breaking through the window, and it's grabbing, and it's pulling, and it's tearing, and then all of a sudden it drives away. And I never, the same way that Jason Voorhees, we never think of him as the little scrawny, emaciated kid that's jumping on the boat at the end of the movie. It's like, you don't think of Michael Myers as that fast-moving, jumping, leaping track star like you put it. You know, he's always that slow, methodical. It's like he's like the Undertaker from the WWE.
I have a nice tie-in to Undertaker later on.
Nice.
That's interesting that you brought that up. But yeah, I think you're right. With just the way he moves is very Undertaker-like, which I wonder if he's a fan of Michael Myers. I would have to assume he probably has seen the movies then.
Yeah, hold on. Mark Calloway, right?
Yeah, Mark Calloway.
Okay. Shout out to Mark Calloway. Have you seen the movies? And are you really that tall?
Yeah, I can confirm he is not 7 foot, but he's a legit 6'8".
Oh, no big deal.
Yeah. Kevin Nash wasn't 7 foot tall either, but he was a tall guy. I've met him.
It's kind of like the difference between meeting Goldberg and Gilbert.
Not quite as bad. He was still very super shredder, if you get my reference.
Ooh, well played, sir.
So next shot here, it's going to say Haddonfield, and then it changes and erases and says Halloween. So this is the next day. We have our first shot of Laurie Strode here. She, of course, is played by Jamie Lee Curtis. This movie essentially started a 30-year love obsession of me and Jamie Lee. I don't know why. I always thought she was so hot. True Lies is like that first movie I saw when I was 9 years old, where I was like, oh, I think I like women. What did you think of Jamie Lee Curtis here?
So I think my take on Jamie Lee Curtis is I definitely saw this movie when I was a little bit older and had seen her in other things first. And one, she aged extraordinarily well. Like, there's no doubt about it that she looks the way she looked in Halloween, you know, throughout the 80s and throughout the 90s. Maybe her haircut changed a little bit, but you know, comparing her to how she was in True Lies, I mean, that's a really great, creepy comparison.
I don't think I'm the only one that has an obsession with the True Lies scene that we all know I'm talking about.
All you have to say is the True Lies scene.
So, you know it's bad when the first thing you type into YouTube pops up that scene if you put her name in. It's hilarious. So anyway, she goes and her father asks her to drop off a key at the Myers house, so she starts to walk to school. She's joined by Tommy, who wants to know where she's headed. She says the Myers house, and he warns her to not go up there, that he's heard bad things, but Laurie doesn't pay any attention and drops the key off under the mat. As she walks away, we see over the shoulder of Michael, and he is watching her as she walks away. What did you think of this first shot of Laurie and Michael here?
It sets the stage for the movie. I love there's so many amazing shots in this movie, and we'll get into more of them later. But it's sets a creepy tension to the movie, and I think it does it in a way that a lot of movies at this time had not yet really discovered, where you can do a lot more by showing as opposed to telling.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Tommy tells her he will see her tonight. She walks off singing a song to herself, and we have another shot of Michael over the shoulder, and he's watching Laurie walk away. You can hear his heavy breathing coming. It's very similar to Darth Vader here. And I know Star Wars did come out before Halloween did, so do you think that's something that was taken from Star Wars?
Yeah, I had never really made that connection before, but I really hope so. I mean, the worst part is when you put on a mask, you really have to breathe like that as it is.
Yeah. And that may have been the thinking behind it, is one, that worked really well in Star Wars that made $1 billion. And two, this is something you would have to do anyway, because you can't breathe in those things other than the tiny little nose hole. On the phone, basically just telling a guy that, hey, you need to alert people that this guy's on the loose and let them know what he's capable of doing. I think that does another good job of kind of setting up like that he's very dangerous, even though we haven't really seen much of him other than when he was a little kid.
Yeah, so, well, it goes into the opposite of what I just said. And you know, as they're doing the show instead of tell, we get a lot of Loomis doing tell instead of show.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting that they kind of walk that line with him, and they do almost for the entire movie up until the end with Loomis. Where yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I mean, that's a great point that you bring up, though, because the two main characters I would say, Jamie Lee Curtis is obviously like the main character, but in this movie, it's almost as if there's Loomis and he's one side, and then in the darkness, there's Michael Myers, and they're like almost exact opposites in what they do and how they act and the way that they interact with people. And, you know, Loomis doesn't really kill anyone, and Michael Myers can't stop killing people.
Right. So we're in the classroom next. Laurie is listening to a lecture when she looks outside and sees the same car that we saw drive off in the night that was stolen. She does a double take at the car and then gets called on to answer a question by the teacher. And after she finishes answering the question, she looks back outside and the car is gone. This is not going to be the last time we talk about Michael being there 1 second and gone the next. And it's something he does in every single movie. This is really the first time that we see that.
It's just, maybe cars were a lot creepier back in the 70s, but the fact that he's in a car sort of like makes me feel less afraid of him.
Sure.
It can be like, nowadays it's like, well, you know, I could just snap a photo of his license plate and text to the cops and be like, look out for this motherfucker.
Yeah, the technology back then was you wanted to get a hold of somebody, you yelled down the road like Rocky Balboa. So, yeah, I don't have a number. Just give me a call. Like, yo, rock! So the class bell rings. We see Tommy. He's got a huge pumpkin that he's carrying. And he's kind of getting bullied here by some kids that keep saying, he's going to get you. He's going to get you. The boogeyman is coming. And Tommy's tries to walk away, and one of the kids trips him, and he falls right on top of the pumpkin and breaks it. And then the boys hear the bell, and they start to run off. One of them runs directly into Michael Myers. We only see about 3/4 of him here. We're still not seeing his face. He's going to sit there and watch Tommy walk across the schoolyard, and then also get into the car and drive right up alongside him before he speeds off after a few seconds. This seems very eerie to me. It's creepy that he'd be following a young boy like this, but, you know, what were your thoughts?
There are a lot of pieces of the story that we don't yet have, so like seeing the way that it comes together fragmented like this, it makes it really creepy, you know?
Yeah.
And we know from the tagline, and we know from, you know, the trailer and everything that we discussed in the trailer breakdown what we have for preconceived notions of the movie, but I think you're right, it does make it a lot creepier.
Mm-hmm. We've got Loomis on a payphone next. If you're born before probably 2000, a payphone is something you used to do if you had to make a call to somebody. We didn't have cell phones. But he tells the guy that he's coming, and if you don't prepare, it will be your funeral. So again, he's doing more of the telling, not showing. He hangs up and sees a truck over by the train tracks and walks over to it. This scene made me laugh a little bit just because if you remember what the movie Super 8, and the kid that's filming, they go, there's a train, let's get it for production value. I feel like that's what they did here. As he walked over to the truck, the train goes by at the same time. They're just like, free production here.
Well, I gotta, you know, I'm gonna toss you a throwback lob here, but I mean that's the same thing that happened in the cult classic hit film Slurpees.
So you did watch it?
I just remember the train scene.
Production value, love it. So anyway, he walks over to the truck. He finds some white clothing, which is what Michael would have been wearing at the loony bin, and he leaves. And the camera pans to the side, and we see a guy who's looks pretty naked in the bushes, and presumably that's how Michael has gotten his clothing that he's now wearing.
Blue jumpsuit.
A blue jumpsuit. Very, very Ghostbusters 2, if you ask me. In the next scene, we have Laurie and Linda walking. Linda just loves the word totally. And I think she's totally hot, too. But Laurie says, as usual, she has nothing to do tonight. Nancy runs up and joins them. The car passes again with Michael, slowly, and Nancy yells, "Hey, jerk, speed kills." The car slams on the brake. Linda says, "Can't he take a joke?" Laurie says, "One day your mouth is going to get you in trouble." Totally. So, what did you think of the entrance here of Linda and Nancy and their first encounter with Michael?
I gotta say, it was definitely exciting to see the all-famous PJ Souls. You remember the band Local H?
Yes.
Yeah, they had the album that came out in 2004 called, Whatever Happened to PJ Souls.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been obsessed with PJ Souls ever since that album came out. Always like, whatever happened to PJ Souls? So every time I watch this movie, I get super excited. And I'm like, there she is.
Yeah, so I don't think you're the only one that has wanted to know what happened to PJ Souls, because she was also cast in The Devil's Rejects by Rob Zombie, who is a fan of hers.
Absolutely.
So Laurie says she will be babysitting at the Doyles tonight. As they are walking down the sidewalk, directly in front of them is Michael standing there. He's behind the bush. Nancy gets mad and storms over to the bush. There's no one there. She calls for Laurie and says he wants to talk to you and take you out tonight. So Nancy gives her some grief. Sorry, before I skip ahead, she walks over and obviously nobody's there. Michael's gone again and disappeared. Nancy gives her some grief about never going out with the girls. Laurie says, guys think she's too smart. And then Nancy goes off, and that's the last we see of her in this scene. But as she goes in the house, Laurie turns around and bumps into her dad, Brackett. And she screams, and he says, well, it's Halloween, so I guess everybody's entitled to one good scare. So that's a pretty iconic line in this film. Any thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, Michael Myers is stealing a lot of people's scares for that day. So there's probably a lot of people that are going to get their one good scare in, but they're like, oh, it's gone. Somebody must be hogging them all. Michael Myers is bogarting them.
I'm sure at some point we're going to cover the sequel, or several of the sequels, and one day we'll do Halloween H2O, in which Jamie Lee Curtis's mother bumps into her in that movie and says the same line. I guess we're all entitled to one good scare. So so one thing I did notice here, and this is just a continuity thing, but after she bumps into Brackett, the sidewalks are noticeably very wet, where in previous shots they're completely dry. And I went back to double check this. It's very obvious. So I just found that kind of humorous for myself that they didn't bother to go back and correct any of that stuff on the filming side, which I'm not sure they could even do in 1978. But anyway, Laurie walks up to her home, and we hear some giggling from down the street. Laurie, I think, at first might think that it's more of like crying or screaming, and she walks over and notices it's just some kids playing around, and talks to herself and says, well, kiddo, I thought you outgrew superstition. And she goes inside, goes upstairs into her bedroom. She looks out the window, and Michael is standing between the clothing line, and she looks a second later and just double takes, and he's gone again. So any thoughts on this with Michael just here 1 second, gone the next second? How's he doing that?
So this is what I think is like one of the greatest things about Michael Myers is he's got some black magic fuckery going on. How does he come? How does he go? And I think that really plays deeply into like what you were saying about him being, not the track star, because he's always a boulder, he's always standing put, and then he disappears, which I think is scarier when you think about him as being slow and methodical as opposed to him being like quick and agile. He's not Jeepers Creepers. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hate that scene in Jeepers Creepers when he jumps over the car. And I know we're jumping way ahead into the future, but what in the shit was he doing jumping over that car?
Yeah, that's something I think we're going to tear apart. By the way, I thought that new movie was coming out. I think it ended up getting like a very limited release because I have not heard a thing about the new Jeepers Creepers.
It has been getting boycotted and protested on account of the director.
Oh.
getting a little touchy with children.
Well, that as it should be then. Okay. So the phone rings next. Nobody's on the other line. We just hear like some gargling. Laurie hangs up. The phone rings again, and this time Annie's on the other end, and she says she had her mouth full.
That's what she said.
There you go. Boy, I teed that up for you good. Annie just lets her know she's going to be babysitting as well, so they're going to be right next to each other today. Later on in the night, watching a couple of kids. Laurie lays down on the bed and says to herself, "Calm down, this is ridiculous." Laurie walks out the house next. She has a pumpkin in her hand. Annie pulls up and Laurie gets in the car. Annie hands her a joint and says, "We have just enough time." I wouldn't take Laurie for a pothead, but it's also the 70s, so what the hell? Any thoughts on that?
I agree. It's definitely, you have to think of it's a different time frame. It's a different mentality, much like in Monster Squad when they're just, willy-nilly calling kids faggots and smashing candy bars like it's no big deal. In the 70s, it was just marijuana. It's not a thing. It's not like she's doing cocaine or crank.
So in this next scene, we have Loomis, and he's with the graveyard keeper. He's telling Loomis a story, but Loomis doesn't seem to care or be listening much to it. They come up to a gravesite that's been dug out. The keeper says, "Damn it, why do they do it?" And Loomis wants to know whose it is. And the guy says 18, 19, 20, Judith Myers.
Dun, dun, dun.
Loomis says he came home. So real quick, I just looking in the casting, I had no idea this would be a nice little tie-in here, but the gentleman that's playing the keeper is from another pretty popular movie that I know we're going to do at some point called Hook. Do you have any idea who this guy is?
Didn't he play Peter Pan?
Nope, it's Toodles. So Annie and Laurie are smoking in the car as they drive. Laurie starts choking a little bit, which I found funny. She's clearly not much of a pothead. Behind them in the rear view mirror is Michael, who's following them. They pull up to Annie's dad, Officer Brackett. He's outside of a store. There's an alarm going off. Annie tells Laurie to ditch the joint, which she tosses out the window. And they pull up, and she asks Brackett, "What's going on here?" And he says, it's just some kids. And she said, "You blame everything on kids." Well, all they took was some Halloween mask, a rope, and a couple knives. So that's kind of a big plot point here, because obviously that's how Michael Myers gets all his stuff, is he knocks up the store.
Yeah, and he wants to blame it on kids instead, it's just a homicidal maniac.
Right, exactly.
It's like the collar of the century. If he just does his job as a cop, sort of like figure out who, what, why.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as the ladies drive off, Loomis walks up to Officer Brackett and introduces himself, tells him he wants to have a word with Brackett, and he tells him it's very important. In the background, Michael drives off behind Loomis, who never sees the car. So in the next scene,
not a good detective.
Yeah, there goes your detective theory, because clearly he would have had the wherewithal to turn around and look.
Ooh, nice word.
Was it like a $4 word?
I think that was about $4 and a quarter.
There you go, a quarter. So Laurie says, "I think he knew. He could smell it." They're obviously talking about the pot. Next, Laurie wants to know what Annie's going to do for the dance. And Annie replies with, "I didn't know you thought about stuff like that." So, again, they're just kind of painting that picture of Laurie is this goody two-shoes. She's not somebody that likes to go party. She's not going to go to the dance. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it definitely makes her sort of an underrated character. So you're building her up as the underdog.
Yes.
A lot of information still to come about who she is really playing out in the story, but you definitely you don't expect much from her. You sort of see her as weak, as frail, as incapable. I mean, are you getting the same vibe?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you're right on with really building her up as this underdog. Like, she's not somebody that would be able to defend herself. So in the background again, we see that Michael is following very closely behind. He sees exactly where they stop the car. He watches Laurie walk into the house, and then he sees Annie pull into the driveway directly across the street. Again, this is a big plot point because that's how he knows exactly where they're at later on in the movie here.
He definitely does his homework.
Yeah. So in the next scene here, we have Michael exiting the car. We hear some trick-or-treaters kind of walking around. Michael's watching from the sidewalk, kind of hiding behind a tree. In the sequels, you really don't get as much point of view of Michael standing and stalking, and at least from my memory. What do you think of this? Kind of just seeing him in different spots and having him watch people from a distance, and just your thoughts on that, and just the filming technique that they're really using here.
It definitely goes to show for how methodical and like how slow moving and how paced Michael Myers is. And, at one point Loomis mentions how Michael Myers just stares at the wall, but staring through the wall. He's like, my gosh, he's almost like a Magneto level superhero with like how his intellect for strategy is, for spooking, for finding information. Like, I honestly do not think that Scooby-Doo could unmask him.
So what is your opinion on just, I feel like the sequels kind of got away from his stalking a little bit. And he's doing that very heavy in this first film. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you look at the film and you look at the franchise as one long story, as one long symphony, that you can see his gradual growth, his pace, his madness quickening. Like, he's finding what he wants. He's identifying, I don't want to give any spoilers out for later in the story, but he's identifying who he wants to kill or why he wants to kill. And he's slowly going about it. It's like a train, like as it gets faster and faster and faster. And that's what makes, like, at least like the the first sequel, it's such a great movie because it, boom, picks up right where the first one leaves off.
Right.
And we get to see that momentum that builds in who he is and his character, that, he still has the elements of stalking, but, come by the time the later sequels in the franchise come, man, he's a train off the rails.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. So Loomis and Brackett enter the old Myers house. They come across a dead dog. Loomis says he got hungry. And Brackett says no man would do that, which Loomis replies he's not a man. They walk upstairs. Loomis explains it happened here. She was sitting right there. The glass shatters, and they're definitely scared by this. It's just a broken gutter has fallen down and broken some glass there. And Brackett looks at him and says, "You just look plain scared." Loomis says, he just agrees and said, "Yes, I am. I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left, no reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary of life or death or any sense of right or wrong was gone. I met this 6-year-old pale child with pale skin and just the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to get him to open up and 7 years trying to keep him locked up. But when I realize what's living behind the boy's eyes is pure evil." So this is a pretty long monologue here by Loomis. But I think this really paints a pretty good picture of exactly what they're dealing with here.
Yeah, and it's a great, Donald Pleasance really gives a great performance in this movie.
Yeah.
John Carpenter does a great job of giving him lines with a lot of energy, with a lot of substance, and with a lot of depth. And again, comparing who the character of Michael Myers is versus who the character of Loomis is, they are polar opposites, where Michael Myers can say nothing and, give that same level of depth with a performance.
Yeah.
Loomis uses his words to sort of build that moment and to build that terror of what he's facing. It's definitely, to me, it's light and day.
Yeah. And just to give credit where it's due, John Carpenter is the one that focused mostly on the Loomis lines, and co-writer Deborah Hill focused on all the other writing with the girls. So Brackett wants to know what to do with Michael, and this kind of goes back to your detective theory. Loomis tells him basically what to do. He says he thinks he'll be back tonight to tell his men to keep their eyes open and their mouths shut, and he's going to wait for Michael at the home. Back into the house, we've got Tommy and Laurie. Tommy's asking about the boogeyman. Laurie kind of gives her version of what he is. Annie calls on the other phone and says she has big news for Laurie. A dog enters the room and starts barking. Outside, we see Michael Myers behind a bush looking into the house. The dog finally stops barking and goes outside. Laurie wants to know what the big news is. Annie says, "What if I told you you have a date to the dance?" And she tells Laurie she's talked with Ben Tramer, and he got real excited when she told him how attracted you are to him. Tommy goes over to the window and looks across the street to see Michael standing in front of the house where Annie is. He runs to tell Laurie the boogeyman is outside, but he's gone by the time she looks.
I'm glad that they bring in the kids element.
Yes.
It's like a whole nother layer of spookiness and creepiness. I mean, obviously the movie's Halloween, so it revolves around Halloween. But, I think it definitely does a good job of like infusing some nostalgia into the story, and you feel for being a kid and looking out the window and thinking you see the boogeyman and just getting your mind blown.
Mm-hmm. So in this next scene, we see Annie make a mess on her shirt. She calls to Lindsay to get some help, but she doesn't answer, so she ends up stripping down and puts a button-up shirt on. For all you pervs at home, we don't see much here. So outside, we have Michael continuing to stalk and watch. The dog approaches him outside. You hear some barking, and then you hear a loud whimper. After Annie yells to Lindsay to get the dog, she goes, "Never mind, I think he found a hot date." So if by hot date you mean a broken neck, then I guess he found what he was looking for.
Heyo.
Laurie and Tommy are watching The Thing on television. That's a great movie. Could be a future episode. Tommy wants to know about the boogeyman again, in which Laurie says, "Halloween is a night where people play tricks on you." And she kind of laughs it off to Tommy. She tells Tommy that she's here and she won't let anything happen to him. So to go back, a few minutes ago when we talked about her being painted as, the underdog here, now she's starting to show some toughness.
She has some depth to her character.
Mm-hmm. So Annie walks to the backyard. There's a shed and a washer back there. The door shuts behind her, and she turns around thinking it's somebody that she knows, and she goes over to the door and calls out for Paul, but no one's there, and she says must be another one of his neat tricks. The door slams again this time, but it's locked. So I was a little confused by this. How do you lock the door from the outside on an inside door, like an inside door type of place or an inside room? How does that happen?
Black magic fuckery.
So she calls out to Lindsay, but she's not going to answer. She's too busy watching the movie. So she ends up going over to the window and tries to crawl out of it. So back inside the house, the phone rings. Lindsay answers it. It's Paul. She goes outside to tell Annie and finds her stuck in the window. Annie asked her to promise not to tell anybody about this. And then on their way back in the house, the phone rings and Lindsay runs in to beat her and answers by saying, "She's coming. She got stuck in the window." So good old Lindsay ratted her out right away. So I don't know when we're going to talk about Lindsay again. This feels like as good a time as any to bring up her credit page here. So obviously she was a little girl when she made this movie, but did you get a chance to look into who she is and what she's done since?
No, I did not.
Okay, so I kind of figure that this is probably not your bag as far as what you watch on television. but she is on the very popular reality show, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and has been for the last 7 years.
You were right to understand that. I have no idea and would not have guessed that.
So for any female listeners at home, she is Kyle Richards, and she's basically the star of that show. So, little pop culture for us there. Anyway,
way to go on you for knowing that. I mean, we learned a lot about you today.
Yes.
I've learned I need a new co-host.
Well played. So Annie grabs the phone from Lindsay. She's talking with Paul back and forth, and as she moves to the left, you see Michael. When she moves back to the right, he's no longer there. Again, we just keep setting up these little glimpses of him that keeps you on your toes. So they do this a lot in the middle of the film, kind of putting him in position as almost like a snake waiting on a prey. He's not doing much, but he's putting the audience, like I said, on its heels, kind of expecting something to happen. Why do you think this isn't done more in cinema today? And do you even feel like this approach would work on a new movie or a new horror slasher film?
Well, we got into discuss that a lot last week with Friday the 13th, the way that horror movies from this time frame define what all future horror movies will do. But the way that cinema goes, it's an ocean, you know? It goes in waves. You get your repeat ideas and notions. Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
You get your repeat waves, and you realize that some things stick and some things don't. And the way that the audiences hit the edge of their seats changes, but a lot of it does come back. So you can't do a lot of those same things, but you can build off of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll use the example of the movie The Strangers, which, my gosh, that was kind of like grinding your teeth against a chalkboard, just waiting for it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say they probably took a lot from the original Halloween for that movie. So, great. Good point. So Annie goes into the next room and tries to get Lindsay to turn off the television and come with her if she wants to go meet up with Paul. Lindsay is very unhappy, and Annie says she will fix it so she can watch television, and walks her across the street to Laurie and Tommy. And as they cross the street, we see Michael. Again, this time he kind of pops out from behind a car. That one made me laugh a little bit. I don't know if he was faking like he was changing a tire, but it was a little odd that he was just like popped out from the car and like he was clearly squatting down.
Well, I think, you know, even serial killers have their moments where they're on and they're off. He clearly has some serious mental issues that I wouldn't be surprised if he deals with a little bit of social anxiety. He's like, am I going to hide behind the car? Maybe I look like I'm busy. He's like, nah, I don't want to spook them yet. Like, he has to eat food, so maybe he's like, I'm going to go to Wendy's. No, you know, I ate that dog meat earlier. I mean, who knows what's going through his mind?
So Annie convinces Laurie to watch Lindsay by saying she'll consider calling Ben Tramer in the morning and calling off the date, which Laurie agrees right away. Annie walks out into the garage and tries to get into her car. The door's locked, so she walks back into the house, grabs her keys. It's a very tense scene. I thought something might happen in the house, but she makes it back out to the garage, and she never puts the key in the car to unlock it, but the door opens right up. And she sits down, and before she puts her keys in the ignition, she kind of realizes, like, I didn't unlock the door. And then you see the glass is all fogged up, and she touches it with her finger. And then Michael pops out from the back seat and strangles her before slashing her in the throat.
Because it's so subtle, and at the time when this came out, like, it's just, you know, like a horror movie now would sort of, like, skip over that attention to detail where it would just be like, oh, fuck it, who cares why the door's open? Or, you know, fuck it, who cares why the cell phone doesn't have reception? It just doesn't have reception.
Right.
You know, but there's purpose and there's reasoning behind why the door's unlocked, and there's some sort of realization that she has in this scene where the door's unlocked and she realizes, like, wait a second, something's not right here, and then bam, something in fact is not right.
So back in the house, we have Tommy and Lindsay watching a scary movie. Tommy goes behind a curtain to try and scare Lindsay. When he turns around and looks outside and he sees Michael carrying Annie back into the front of the house. And this is pretty blatant here. I mean, he's doing this with a big giant porch light on, and nobody seemed to notice whatsoever.
Yeah, I definitely feel like his short game is suffering in this scene.
Yeah.
He needs to spend some time on the course with Chubbs to really iron out, what do you do with those bodies, Michael? You can't just cart them around, and he gets better in later movies, strategically placing them to be found. But, this is kind of like a party foul. Like, I feel like the other serial killers are watching and cringing and going, dude, really? Even though it is his rookie outing, it's his rookie season.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Tommy bumps into Lindsay coming out from behind the blinds, and they both let out a scream. Laurie comes into the room, and Tommy tells her he just saw the boogeyman. Laurie says she's going to turn off the scary movie if he doesn't stop. So Lindsay takes his side, though, and says she believes him. So, yeah, Michael Myers is only mentioned in one other Halloween movie as the boogeyman. I believe it's number 4 or 5. But I like that Tommy continues to refer to him as the boogeyman. I think that's a good touch on that character.
I agree. Like, the boogeyman is such like a cultural relevance that people can like relate to. Before Michael Myers really gets defined with his characteristics and like how strong and how powerful, like, and how capable he is as a killer. I mean, he is the boogeyman. He's haunting. He's in the shadows. He's changing car tires. Like, he's all sorts of just like creeping and spooking.
Mm-hmm. Back at the old Myers house, we've got 3 young kids approaching. One kid says he's not that scared, and he says he'll go inside the house. So we see Loomis along the side. He decides to have a little fun with them. And when Lonnie goes up onto the porch, he yells, "Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there." And the kids run off. And as Loomis kind of chuckles to himself, Brackett grabs him by the shoulder and scares him. So
I really think Loomis is kind of a creeper. Like, again, I think that he plays a foil to Michael Myers in this movie in many ways, and like he really gets joy out of creeping those little kids, don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And one of the things I found watching the special features and a couple interviews, kind of to your point here, is everybody on set said that by far Donald Pleasance was the scariest thing. And just his intensity and the way he would stare at people, he was much scarier than the Michael Myers guy. Anyway, Brackett says he's not convinced anything is actually happening, and if he's going to stay up all night, he's going to need some evidence. Loomis again says the devil has come to your town. Brackett says Haddonfield is a place for families. He just doesn't see it. But he agrees to stay with him tonight in the chance that if he's correct. But damn you for letting him go. That's another classic Halloween line. Do you think it's fair to blame Loomis for this, if that's the case?
Well, I know the future movies and everything that Rob Zombie did really delves deep into that. Like, that alone is a concept that fleshed out, like, painfully. So is Loomis to blame for this? Was he not enough doctor to look after this patient with extreme mental disabilities and just to be willy-nilly driving around with a nurse late at night? What were they doing in that car late at night?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I think that there could be some blame that gets put to Loomis, but I think Loomis does feel that blame. Like, I think Loomis does feel a large portion of responsibility for letting Michael Myers go, and that's why he single-handedly is trying to wrangle him back. Yeah. Yep. Let me ask you something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's deviate for a moment. What's your favorite line in this movie? Did we just witness your favorite line?
That's one of them. I think my favorite line is going back to Loomis's talk earlier when he talks about he's got the blackest of eyes. That's probably my favorite line, is when he talks about him just being, basically the devil.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I love that. Again, I mean, I know we've already touched and harped on that delivery that he gives in that there, but I mean, his performance is good. I love when he tackles the kids, though.
Linda is totally back in the next scene, and she's totally making plans to sleep with this Bob guy who's driving. They make a plan to go inside, talk with Annie first, and eventually make their way upstairs to do some hibbity-dibbity, if you know what I mean.
A little bit of the old in, out.
They go in the house, and no one's inside. Linda says, it's totally dark in here. And then they start making out on the couch. Michael watches from the entranceway, maybe 8 to 10 feet away from them, which I found very creepy. In the next scene, we have Laurie. She walks into the living room with the kids. She's carrying a jack-o'-lantern, and she looks out the blinds and sees the truck parked outside and says, everyone's having a good time tonight. So the phone rings, and it's Linda calling from across the street. She wants to know where Annie is. Laurie said she went to go pick up Paul. Linda says, well, she's totally not here. And then Laurie explains that she's watching Lindsay for the rest of the night. So she wants to know when Annie gets back, what time she should put her down to bed. So when they hang up, Linda says, Lindsay's gone for the rest of the night. So they go ahead and head upstairs right away. And I think we all know what's going to go on up there. Probably a pretty intense game of hide and seek.
I don't know if you're being serious or silly, but I was going to vote for A. But I think you're right with a little bit of hide and seek.
So upstairs, Linda and Bob are going at it on the bed. I guess that answers my question of if they were going to go play hide and seek or not. And the phone rings. They don't answer. So Bob decides to take the phone off the hook. And they both finish. And Linda says, fantastic. Totally. What do you think she's insinuating there?
I think they just ate a massive burrito. Or at least she did.
Yeah. Who knows? Good for him, though. Now,
he gets to smell the burp.
You can see Michael's shadow go across the back wall. Linda lights up a cigarette. Actually, 2 cigarettes at the same time. So she's clearly a badass. And hands one to Bob and then asks him if he wants a beer. And then tells him to go get it. So I love how demanding she is, and I totally would have went and got the beer too. Bob goes downstairs. He's in the fridge. The back door creaks open. He checks it out. There's nobody in the back door, but you can hear some heavy breathing. And as he approaches the closet door, it bursts open, and Michael chokes him, lifting him off the ground and eventually jabbing a butcher knife into his chest. The camera pans out, and you can see Michael just staring at his lifeless body, and he kind of tilts his head a little bit. What did you think of this scene? Because I feel like this is really probably the first really kind of gory scene. I guess there's really no blood, but...
Yeah, his killing mentality is speeding up. There's definitely some more visceral, menacing activity that he's pulling off here. Like, he's becoming Michael Myers. Does he have the mask on yet?
Oh yeah, he's got the mask.
Okay. He's becoming Michael Myers. He's got the mask on. He's got his blue jumpsuit. He's got his knife. Like, he's really coming into his own.
Mm-hmm. And we've got Linda back in the bed. She's now filing her nails, and the door opens up. And we see a big white sheet over the top of, we have to assume it's Michael Myers. But cleverly, he's put Bob's glasses where his eyes go. Linda chuckles when she sees him. And then she flashes him and says, see anything you like? And then she cracks another joke and then gets annoyed and wants to know where her beer is. And we've got boobs here. So
we've got boobs here. See, nobody cares.
Don't go cheap on me, Dotson. So
I just spit up coffee.
So Linda says she's going to call Laurie and see where Annie's at. This thing is going nowhere. She starts to dial the phone, and essentially this is the moment in the film here where the movie really starts to intensify. and we have that like classic score in the background that's going dun 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 dun, and then you have like the high keys. Dee, 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 dee. I'll probably insert some music here so you guys know what the heck I'm talking about. But what did you think of this scene? Because we're going to see Linda get choked out here in a second by the phone cord.
So he's got the sheet on now, right?
Oh yeah, he's got the sheet on. He actually takes the sheet off when he attacks her, but he has it on all the way up until she picks up the phone and dials.
So this scene, for me, for the longest time, remember the scene in Beetlejuice where they're wearing the sheets with the holes cut out in their eyes?
Of course, yes.
You know, it's like the exact scene from Halloween, and I didn't realize that until years later, because I obviously saw Beetlejuice when I was 6 or 7 years old, and, you know, that movie was scary as shit. But didn't see Halloween until I was a little bit older, and so I always, like, the first time I saw Halloween, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the Beetlejuice scene!
Yeah, I wonder if there was some, like a little nod to that film. Maybe that's a favorite of Tim Burton's. Or maybe their director of photography, where they wanted to throw that in there.
Hey, Tim Burton, why don't you call us up and let us know?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do, just don't listen to our Batman review where we bash you a little bit in your later career. But other than that, though, we thought you were great.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, we can go out and have a spooky breakfast together, maybe have some creepy crepes. Who knows?
So after Linda is killed here, Laurie has listened to the entire thing on the phone, so she's now grown concerned. She walks up the stairs to check on the kids. She kind of whispers, "Sleep tight," to the kids as they lay in the bed. We've got back to the Myers house. We have Loomis. He sees the car that Michael has been driving just down the road, so he runs over to the car. The Halloween jingle begins to play in the background. Laurie goes down the stairs and grabs a set of keys and walks out the front door. She walks out the front door and over to the house across the street. How ballsy is she to do this?
I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second.
Yeah, I just said, Laurie grabs her keys and goes across to the house across the street. So I said, how ballsy is she to do this?
Well, you know, we've talked about how we thought she was a little bit of a square earlier on. She's not nearly as badass as that she should be or she needs to be. But as the movie progresses, she definitely is growing a pair of bacon bits.
Yeah, I feel like had I thought something was going on over there, I would have watched from a window and never have left the house.
I would have been Kevin McAllister style, hiding under the bed.
So Laurie walks right up to the front door and rings the bell. Of course, no one's going to answer. She walks around the house and enters through the cracked back door where Bob was just killed. He's no longer hanging around, if you know what I mean. So Laurie still thinks this may be a joke, and she even yells out, "Okay, Annie, enough!" Thinking, the joke's going to be on her here. She warns them to cut it out or they'll be sorry. And she goes up to the stairs and walks upstairs. Now, Horror Movie 101 says never go up the stairs, right? What's she thinking here?
Especially not alone. Maybe you're in a conga line. I guess if you're in a conga line, it's okay.
Yeah, maybe for sure turn on a light, though. But, that would ruin the whole movie for us, so we're glad she didn't. This scene is super creepy. Even in 2007, 39 years later, this still creeped me out a little bit. It's essentially pitch black in the entire house. When she gets up to the top of the staircase, she can see a light on in one of the rooms, and she enters to find a dead Annie laying on the bed with Judith Myers' headstone above her head. Laurie starts to scream. She turns around and Bob comes flying from the ceiling, hanging by his feet. She kind of backs into a corner, still crying. She opens up another door, or actually this one just kind of pops open. And it looks like some type of like a laundry chute or like a small closet. And we see a contorted Linda dead in there. And so Laurie eventually just backs out of the entire room and into the hallway. She stands next to an open black room, and we finally see Michael's face appear. He steps out and knifes her in the arm, but misses, so he only grazes it. And Laurie screams and falls over the railing and down the stairs.
Ugh.
So what do you think of this intense sequence here?
Well, I just love how well that same exact sequence plays out again years later in the movie Scream.
Yeah.
Just saying. But you're right. I mean, it's like the movie is slowly speeding up and speeding up and speeding up. And now it's to the point where you just have to hold your breath and just sort of like hold on to your butts. And just it's creepy as shit. It's the way that it's paced is amazing. The way that he comes out of the darkness, the way that the music is playing into it, just everything about it is just, defining the genre.
Are we going to skip past your Samuel L. Jackson reference there? Hold on to your butts!
I was hoping that that's our second JP reference in this podcast.
I'm nothing wrong with that, if you ask me. So Laurie lands and at the bottom of the stairs and screams in pain. The music really intensifies now, and Laurie looks up and Michael's at the top of the stairs. He starts coming down. She tries to exit, but the door has been jimmied shut with a rake. So she shuts and locks the door behind her. Michael's going to bust through the door and eventually unlock it after breaking through the middle of it. Laurie busts out the window with her elbow and moves the rake out of the way and runs out screaming for help. She goes to the neighbor's house first, knocks on the door, the light turns on, but they don't come out to help her. And this is just so intense as you're watching this here. So Laurie runs back to the Doyle house and knocks on the door, screaming for Tommy to help. She throws something up at the window. He finally turns the light on, and you can see across the street Michael is coming closer and closer as he slowly walks across the street to the Doyle house. Tommy finally gets to the door and opens it up just in time to let Laurie in. So, what did you think of the chase here?
I love the way that Michael Myers is defined in his maliciousness in this.
Right.
Where he's so, like, because, we made the comparison earlier to how he was a, 1936 track star jumping up on the roof of the car. And he's just the most limber, athletic creature in the world, and now he's so methodical with the way that he moves.
Yeah.
He's just piercing. Like it's creepy that he's not running after her.
Yeah, very. So Laurie gets in. She sends Tommy and Lindsay up to the top room, tells them to lock the door. She checks the power has already been cut. So I don't know if he did this before or he just walked straight to the power lines and cut it before she could get to it. She notices that one of the windows, actually both of the windows are open, and there's some wind kind of blowing in. So she sits down by the couch, and right away Michael pops out from behind the couch. He misses again with the knife, kind of jabbing into the couch cushion. Laurie jabs a metal stick into his neck. Michael grabs his neck and then falls down. I don't know what that is. It looked like some type of like knitting needle is what I would guess.
I thought it was one of those like crocheting needles.
Yeah, that's probably correct. If not, tweet at us. Let us know what it was. Instead of
wait for Jesse to correct us.
We're waiting for next episode where Jesse might be on to chastise us for that mistake too. So instead of jumping on Michael here and like jabbing him in the chest 100 times to make sure he's dead, Laurie just drops the knife and just sits on the couch for a little bit. What did you think of that decision?
I'm going to draw the comparison to last week's Friday the 13th, where everything is good, everyone is safe and dandy, and she just jumps into the boat and rows off into the middle of the lake, thinking that, oh, I'm safe, I can relax a little bit now. I got a feeling this is not going to work out in her benefit.
So Loomis is walking around the streets outside. Brackett pulls up. He says, "Where have you been? I went to the house." And Loomis cuts him off and says, "He's here. I found the car." He instructs Brackett to go around the other side, and he will stay here. Back in the house, Laurie goes up to the kids' room. She tells them it's her, and to open the door, the kids hug her. She says she killed him. Tommy says, "You can't kill the boogeyman." And just then, sure enough, Michael appears right at the top of the stairs. She sends the kids back in. They lock the door. Laurie goes into another room. She doesn't lock her door, but she hides in the closet and kind of jimmies it with some type of like necktie or string. Michael comes over to the closet. He kind of wrestles with it a little bit, but I mean, this is a very loose, just wooden closet, so he's going to bust through that pretty easy, which he does right away. And he kind of gets his arm stuck in between the wood paneling and the hangers, and that gives Laurie enough time to grab a hanger, straighten it, and jab him right in the eye. And then he drops his knife, and she grabs that and sticks that into his gut. And he falls down on the ground and presumably is dead a second time. But, I mean, how smart is Laurie here to first grab the hanger and have the wherewithal to straighten it so she can poke him in the eye, and then to grab his knife, too?
Yeah, it almost reminds me of again, we're going to reference Scooby-Doo, but it's sort of, looking around you. Do you remember the Scooby-Doo mystery game for Sega Genesis?
Oh, I sure do.
Yeah, it reminded me of that, or almost like the Adventures of Monkey Island, where you had to find the little pieces around you and be like, oh, finds hanger, straighten hanger, poke with hanger. Like she knows what she's doing here. She's very resourceful, and I think that plays into the way that her character was earlier, where she's reserved. She's not necessarily we think that she's bashful, but in reality, she's just resourceful.
Yeah, that's a good point. Laurie's going to exit the closet here. She has to pretty much walk right over his head. Nothing happens. He stays pretty still. She goes to the room and tells the kids she wants them to go out the front door, run down the street to the Mackenzies, and tell them to call the police and send help. Why do you think she didn't go with them here? Seems like a good a time any just to take off here.
Well, I love putting myself in the shoes of the characters in a horror movie. I try to think, like, what would I do? But, I mean, strategically, it makes sense that she sends the kids away, because the killer can only kill one person at a time, if they're separated. So, I mean, every horror movie has that moment where the group has to separate.
Yep.
And it just makes the most strategic sense, because if everybody is standing in one giant lump, then it's like the scene in Freddy vs. Jason where they're having the party out in the cornfield and he just massacres everyone.
So the kids are going to run outside screaming. Loomis is right in front of the home when they go running out. We go back inside. Michael sits up. Who does a better sit up from being hurt, Michael Myers or Undertaker?
Well, I definitely think Michael Myers sort of defined that sit up motion.
Yes.
And I don't know who's done it more times.
I would definitely say that has to be Undertaker, because he's did it 300 times a year for 20 straight years.
So I'm gonna go ahead and say the rub goes to the Undertaker, and he's got it down by sheer practice.
Yeah, you gotta think that Mark Calloway, the Undertaker, definitely took some notes from watching Halloween here. So Michael Myers is going to walk up behind Laurie. He grabs her and starts choking her. Loomis walks up the stairs, and we see one of the only shots really ever of Michael's face, especially in the sequels. He's got some deformity going on, it looks like, with one of his eyes. I mean, it's a really quick scene. I didn't go back to look at it again. But he quickly puts the mask back on, and Loomis fires a shot, and then a second shot that sends him over the balcony and onto the ground. So what did you think of this sequence here where we see his face and then the shots from Loomis here?
I kind of forgot that you do see his face in here.
Yeah, me too.
It's sort of, that's the thing about having a masked killer, is there has to be a moment when you see their face. Otherwise, there's no payoff necessarily for the mask. And at the same regard, you saw not the newest Star Wars movie, but the Force Awakens.
Yeah.
The most disappointing part of that movie is when Kylo Ren takes off of his helmet
100% agree.
and just for the rest of the movie doesn't have it on anymore.
Yep.
Like, do. I've got just this horribly menacing helmet mask that's frightening as fuck, but let me not wear it anymore. So the point, that Michael Myers, you see his deformity and you see why he has to have the mask on. You're sort of now almost like for the littlest bit are kind of like, dude, no, put the scary mask back on.
Yeah.
And then Loomis comes and totally just John Wayne's him.
Yep. So, earlier you asked me what my favorite line of the movie. This might actually be my favorite line. So, Laurie asked Loomis, "Was that the boogeyman?" And he says, "As a matter of fact, it was." And he goes over to the porch to see where Michael fell, and the body's already gone. And there doesn't seem to be any blood or anything like that, so I don't know if that's just a Michael Myers thing where he doesn't seem to bleed, but he's certainly hurt. We know that because you don't get shot twice and fall 30 feet onto your back and not get hurt.
That happened to 50 cents. Just saying, 50 cents.
So the last scene here, we just have different shots of the house and then a shot outside of the Myers home where we hear Michael breathing in the background outside of his old home. So assumingly that's where he's gone to since he's been shot. And that's the end of the movie. So what did you think of the ending here and final thoughts on Halloween?
I love the way that this movie ends. I love that it ends on the high note where you think the good guys have won only to find like, oh no, Michael Myers is gone.
Right.
And it feeds so perfectly into the sequel. I think, these two movies, the first Halloween and the second Halloween, are just like a perfect combination. Like if you look at other like major horror franchise like Nightmare on Elm Street 1 to Nightmare on Elm Street 2, like what the hell happened? Friday the 13th 1 to Friday the 13th 2. Like,
yeah,
I know that the Friday the 13th movies improve, but they're so startling different.
Mm-hmm.
But this
there's a big change.
Second Halloween just so remarkably, and I love it. It creates the perfect payoff for a sequel.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to reviewing Halloween 2 probably about a year from now, as we will be gearing up to probably revisit this first review, do the second one, and then we've got the new Halloween movie that'll be getting released about this time next year.
Can't wait. I'm super excited.
We'll have a lot to talk about. They actually released today that they've now decided to also not focus on the second movie. So it's just going to be a sequel in an alternate, basically, timeline of the first movie. Everything else after Halloween 1 is being ignored. Any thoughts on that before we wrap up? Because I know we talked about it 2 weeks ago, and we had said it would be the first and the second, but they've now decided against the second one.
Again, because the way that the first movie ends is so perfect. Like it leaves the world wide open. Michael Myers is alive. He's well. He's out there. He's not done. We've established the pre-existing evil that is Michael Myers. We've seen what he can do. He's transformed into himself, and he's still on his mission. So that mission can lead him anywhere, which is what I like about the sequel, because it leads him, spoiler alert, right to the hospital.
Yeah. So where do you think they take this new one? I mean, put yourself in the writing seat. If you were penning this, where would you go?
Oh God, that's a very good question, because the world is so wide open. I would think that Michael Myers, he's got a vendetta towards Loomis now.
Yeah.
But I know that defeats the whole purpose of his motivation of what he's doing and why. So I think that there has to be some major connection between Laurie and Loomis, and maybe they're even the hunt for Michael Myers. Like, if he's not there, where is he?
Right.
Nah, but that makes it too much like to me that sounds like a 90s Red Dragon type sequel to Silence of the Lambs kind of movie.
Yeah, and I don't know where they're going to go with this, and I don't have any really grand ideas for them either to take. But, I guess a couple things I would like to see. Number one, unfortunately, we can't have Donald Pleasance because he was quite old when they did this first movie anyway. So he passed away in 1995. So he was going almost 80 years old at that point, like 75, something like that. So he's been gone for a long time. But I do want to see them have the Loomis character. I think that makes sense to bring him back. But, I mean, I guess if we're saying it's 40 years later, maybe it makes sense for him to be gone. But if that's the case, I'd like to see Tommy. I'd like to see Lindsay, if they're still around, be involved in the storyline in some way, or at least have some type of small cameo that they still live in the town and have some type of relationship with Laurie. And I'm interested to see what's happened with Laurie. What's she been doing for 40 years? And what type of mental issues does she have from trying to be murdered when she was 18?
I mean, but all of that is the kind of stuff that they have tackled in the other franchises.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's difficult to say that they're going to forget everything that's happened, because they've done H2O. They've already done 20 years later.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Tommy at some points brought back into the storyline, I think in like 4 or 5, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in that ballpark.
Right.
I don't remember that Lindsay's ever brought back, but I mean, does Loomis eventually get killed too? Does he get killed in like The Curse of Michael Myers? It's been so long since I've watched the movie. I don't remember if he's ever killed off at any point.
Hey, spoiler alert, man. For all the audience knows, Loomis is Michael Myers. Tune in next year when we review Halloween 2.
I feel like you're messing with me, but that seems like a good time to wrap it up. So we want to thank you again for hitting the download button and listening to episode 11 of the Back in Time podcast. We had a great time revisiting Halloween. Such a great classic movie. Can't wait to dive into the many sequels down the road. We'll be back next week diving into another massive horror franchise as we tackle the original Saw from 2004. So many things to discuss with that film, and it's great timing because the newest sequel in the franchise is going to drop next week as well in theater. So we'll be doing that, and I'm sure I'll be going to see it, and we'll probably have a review on the new movie as well. Middle of the week after. So one last reminder, subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, iTunes, or any podcast app that you use. It's super easy and make sure that you get every single episode. Also, the easiest and the best way to support the podcast is go on there and give us a 5-star rating, write us a quick review. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/backintimepod. We're on Twitter and Instagram. We have a poll topic up there right now. There's still 5 days left to vote on which movie we're going to review in November, comedy movies. So you can pick from American Pie, Wayne's World, Happy Gilmore, and I feel like I'm missing one more.
Ace Ventura.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Thank you, Justin.
Ace Ventura.
Twitter and Instagram, Back in Time Pod. But for now, we're out of time. It's time to jump back into our DeLorean, punch in October 20th, 2017, and return back to present day. Have a great week, and thanks for listening.
It means your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it. So make it a good one. Both of you. We will, Doc. Stand back. All right, boys, buckle up.